Yay! Oh my goodness. I see very good news that we are live, and I am thrilled to be introducing everyone here to Mike Haspel and Rob Greene, two of the kindest, most generous, most talented people that I've ever had the pleasure of working for and with. And we are here today celebrating the release of Rob's second speculative fiction novel, which is called 25 to Life. We're going to talk about that. Oh, look at you with the waving of the wonderful material. These two have a lot to talk about. You are all in for a treat. It is my absolute pleasure to be here. We're going to start with just a little introduction. So Mike, tell us a little bit about you, then Rob, tell us a little bit about you, and then I'm going to start with a really big question about typewriters.
Okay. So my name is Michael Haspil. I write under Michael Franz Haspel or Michael F. Haspel. My debut novel came out like 4 years ago now, just a little bit, 4 years and a month. And it's called Graveyard Shift. And it's about an immortal pharaoh in modern day Miami going up against a vampire conspiracy. It's police procedural urban fantasy. Not for the faint of heart, I would say. It's kind of hard hitting, and then I've got a bunch of stuff coming out for IPs that I'm not able to talk about yet because they're tied to product releases. So mum's the word on those. But I do have a short story I'm very proud of called The Penultimate Stand of Pinot Gracchi that is in a sci-fi Western anthology called Gunfight on Europa Station that comes out in November. So, and that's a great story. I love it. I'm going to revisit those characters absolutely because they're just too fun.
Thank you.
Mike, a question that's been burning within my heart since I read your book is, what made you put the Pharaoh in Miami and not Tucson?
Oh, because Miami, I actually have an answer for that.
I figured you would.
That is not really mentioned in Graveyard Shift, but that the undead don't like the cold. So they could have been in Tucson, but Miami is a smorgasbord for vampires. You can just sample all these different ethnicities and everything like that. So that's why they like Miami.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks.
So Rob, now you have to introduce us to yourself.
Yeah, I'm Rob. I write as RWW Greene because it's easier to Google. Rob Greene is pretty ubiquitous out there as far as writers go. This is 25 to Life is my second book with Angry Robot, and it's kind of a post-apocalyptic, after we've reached the tipping point of climate change. This young woman is one of the 10 million people left behind after the humanity-saving trip to Proxima Centauri takes off. So there's not a lot of hope. There's not a lot of possibility, but she kind of needs to find a way and a reason to live anyway. So she does. I started writing the book probably, 2010, and I'm sad to say that I see a lot of it coming true over the next, 50 to 70 years. So I'm sorry.
Well, so there's an interesting list on Goodreads called Science Fiction That's Way Too Scary. And not meaning jump scares, but realistic. And both of you write science fictions or speculative fiction or urban fantasy that have very, very different worlds, but both of that have that way too scary element. I mean, when Mike was introducing Graveyard Shift a minute ago, he said not for the faint of heart. And Rob, you're talking about 25 to Life, and what you just said is I see way too much of it coming true. So I have a really cool question for you both about typewriters, but let's sidebar that for a second, because I want to dig into the world similarities and differences. And we're here in conversation with Rob, but I think it's really interesting that you both have that element in your books, and I was wondering if you could talk to each other about that. So what about Graveyard Shift for Mike and 25 to Life for Rob? What about these two books is science fiction that's quote unquote way too scary? So Rob, do you want to go first since it's your launch week?
Am I talking about Mike or am I talking about?
No, you're talking about your own book. You're talking about your own book.
I wrote a draft of this book. One of the first drafts I wrote with my my MFA program at Southern New Hampshire University, and one of my mentors at that point in time is a noted outdoor writer. He told me in one of my evaluations that it was one of the most realistic portrayals of like climate change that he had seen in fiction. And it just kind of looks at like a lot of the ocean rising. In the book, like Fenway Park in Boston has been kind of it's been torn down and given back to the ocean as a sea buffer, which is stuff that you actually see happening down in say Jersey right now after Sandy. There's entire neighborhoods that have been bought back by the feds, and they've moved the neighborhoods and they've turned those neighborhoods into marshlands and wetlands with the hope to absorb some of the sea. But you've got a little bit of COVID type stuff in there. I tell you, since 2020, everything that did not seem completely possible to happen definitely seems possible now. We've all lived through some of that dystopian science fiction future. So that's kind of what the stuff that I'm seeing, and that's the stuff that really scares the hell out of me is maybe not so much the things that bump in the night, but the things that could actually happen. One of my favorite writers is Kim Stanley Robinson, and Kim writes some fantastic cli-fi, I guess as they call it, about like what is going to change and how it's going to happen. I'm old, I'm 50 years old, so I'm not going to be around for the worst of it, but my former students are, and my nieces and nephews and that kind of stuff are, and that's the stuff that really kind of scares me.
So in 25 to Life, there's mention of COVID-90.
Mm-hmm.
There's also mention of the new Eastern Seaboard. I think these are some of the things that you effortlessly and organically thread into your novel, which makes the world building so interesting. It's certainly, Kim Stanley Robinson is also one of my favorite authors. I remember reading his Years of Rice and Salt years ago and just jumping up and down, screaming, why isn't this an education curriculum? This should be the educational curriculum right here.
Yeah.
And so I think that's, you've touched on some really interesting things, and it plays out in the book beautifully. So Mike, your book, Graveyard Shift, is more about the things that go bump in the night.
Yeah, definitely. It's about shapeshifters, vampires, and one mummy, really, who can pass for human. But what's that?
I said no spoilers, but I'm just kidding because it's on the back cover copy.
Yeah. So I wrote it a long time ago, like 2009. And when I was writing it, I was just noticing some trends that were popping up, but that seemed really far-fetched at the time. And so I was just trying to go, well, what if this came about? Like what if vampires were actually real and everybody knew about them? How would the world react? And I had a bunch of stuff in there about ICE trying to control the vampire population and how immigration is getting involved, but it's not really immigration. It's people being turned into vampires, and they're trying to control the spread of that. And it culminates, without getting into too much spoilers, into something I never thought I would see in my lifetime in the United States, and that is race riots. Mm-hmm. It just so happens that the race riots in my book are vampires against everyone else. But I wrote what we saw last year in my novel. And when I was watching it on TV, it was just so surreal. I was just like, I can't believe this is actually happening. Because I thought that was all behind us, but apparently not.
Yeah, that's one of the things I liked about your book, Mike, is it does kind of it's a kind of a metaphor for what if minorities really were dangerous. What if they were as dangerous as the culture of power thought they were, and what a different world we live in if it was true.
Mm-hmm. And also, if you look at the heroes in Graveyard Shift, then who is it that stands up for us?
Them.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, both heroes are wildly powerful immortals, and how that throws the power dynamic on its head. It's at the speed of light, because that book is so fast paced, like a Jerry Bruckheimer film. It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. And it's also kind of morally relative. Like, they're good guys, but only because the bad guys are worse.
Right.
sometimes. Like they make decisions that you're like, how is that? How is that a good guy decision? And it's just like, well, the bad guys are worse.
Right, but that's
know?
even closer to the truth, because I've kind of come to believe that there really are no good guys. It's just kind of various degrees of shades of gray. You know, what shade of gray can you tolerate being or being with? You know, fascinating stuff.
That is. So kind of out of left field, but both of you pre-pandemic were very well experienced in attending conferences. And, you know, that's something that the two of you have in common that I'd love for you to chat about a little bit, because I met Rob initially at Dublin Con in Dublin 2 years ago. And I met Mike initially at Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Conference, mumble years ago. 12, 13, 14 years ago, something
a long
like that.
time ago.
A long time ago. And throughout the years of your careers, both in writing short material, because I know, Rob, you've written a lot of short material in addition to the 2 novels with Angry Robot, and in addition to the IP work, Mike, that you've been doing, you've both been very present at conferences. And so I'd like for you to talk a little bit about what has 2019, 2020, 2021 meant to that conference attendance. For example, Rob, you were really high up in the hierarchy of running Boscone earlier in the year, which I thought was one of the best run and most engaging and interesting virtual conferences I've done in 18 months. And Mike, you just got back from Wichita, which was a live in-person conference. So can you two talk a little bit about what conferences have brought to your careers and what these past year and a half has meant for that?
You want to shoot first, or shall I shoot first?
Oh, I can go first, Mike.
Okay.
When I speak to nascent writers now, that's my number one piece of advice is yeah, you can get all these different books. I usually recommend Alexandra Sokolov's book, like Stealing Hollywood, because it's all this information in one place. And she has a ton of footnotes. So if you read something that's really good that catches your eye, you can go find the deeper source. But it's a great survey book. But the second thing I tell everybody is find a writer's conference and go there. And it's like taking a master's class in a weekend. It's going to be a data dump, but it levels up your craft ridiculously quickly. So if you want to do that, do that. And then for 2019 and 2020, it actually afforded me opportunities I don't think I would have had. I was a guest at World Fantasy Con, which was incredible, and I got to display my miniatures. I paint a lot of Warhammer miniatures and other small scale, army men, but they're not army men; they're miniatures.
They're much cooler than army men. Yeah.
But I got to display like my dioramas and all my miniatures at the art show at World Fantasy Con, and I don't think that would have happened in person, at least not yet. I mean, maybe a couple years down the road, but because it was all virtual and they didn't have to worry about space in the hall, they were just like, hey, if you have stuff you want to show it. So that was great. And I've been able to attend way more conferences because of the whole virtual aspect. Now it's not as great as being there, and being able to talk to people and everything like that. But it's been very useful, like Life, the Universe and Everything conference, and a couple other ones. I was just thinking of another one that we just did where they kept all the panels up for, I think, 30 days after the con. Yeah. So we watched all the panels. So you can't do that if you're in person. So
right. That's cool.
So that's a small silver lining, I guess.
That's cool. Yeah, my home con, Boscone, has been going on for almost 60 years at this point. And it's because it's in Boston, it's close to Harvard, it's close to MIT. So, all the people on the panels are likely to be, scientists of some sort. And the woman sitting next to you is probably an astronaut, so you never know what you're going to run into there. So it is, like you were saying, a master's class, so I have a little black notebook. I write down everything. And then I refer to it often. And I like cons for that reason, because you're able to kind of, listen and you can be a fly on the wall and learn a lot, or if you get engaged, you can learn a lot too. My two favorite con experiences was, one was at San Diego Comic-Con, where I went for my honeymoon.
Wow.
where I took a leak next to the guy who played Odo on Deep Space Nine in the bathroom. That was pretty cool. But my next cool experience was when James Patrick Kelly, who's a Hugo Nebula science fiction writer, invited me to have dinner with him and Brendan Du Bois, who's another science fiction writer. So, here I am with my little portfolio of like crappy little short stories I've written and sent out, and no published novels and that kind of stuff. And, Jim was saying, hey, you want to go to dinner? And I sat there with these two dudes, these and Brendan is working with James Patterson now, and James Patrick Kelly is like, he's got a short story in Mirror Shades, which is the seminal cyberpunk anthology. So I'm sitting there with these two guys, kind of agog, to be in their presence. So that was the great kind of in-person experience about the cons. I also went to, it was called Reconvene, which is the Boscombe people put on this kind of like experimental con to see if like a virtual Boscombe would work. Mm-hmm. So they did a single day, like 5-hour con where they like tried all the technology out and did all that kind of stuff. And I figured out from that the perfect virtual con is like one day. Because if you go somewhere for a convention, then you're like, you're locked in, you're in the hotel, you're doing the thing, you're there for every day. If you're not locked in, then you're at home and you remember you need to rake the leaves and do the dishes and take care of the cat and that kind of stuff. But one day you can kind of take that one day off and really kind of focus, and you can kind of hit all the conventions and that kind of stuff. And as you were saying, Sarah, they were sharp, they were on in terms of like, let's switch to here, let's switch to here, let's do this. And, to Mike's point, once it was over, you could watch everything, your membership lasted for another 30 days, and every single convention every single panel you missed, you could watch again. Mm-hmm. And, I don't steal my ideas from conventions, but I've been known to jot down some ideas that become my ideas when other people have forgotten that they came up with them first. So, you just never know what you're going to find or what you're going to meet or who you're going to see or what you're going to be exposed to at these conventions. And I'm mighty happy that they might be coming live again, as long as people get vaccinated.
Yep. So, which yes, vaccinated. And so this is your launch week. Did you have a real in-person book launch?
I am going to tomorrow. Gibson's in Concord is my it's one of my hometown bookstores, and they're going to be doing a book launch for me. We're going to be wearing masks, so I mean that's cool. I got to figure out the refreshments, because usually I do like wine and cheese, and you can't have people coughing over the same wine and cheese, so I got to figure that out. So I've got that, and I may have something the week after. But I've decided, since setting those up, that I'm not going to pursue any more live events, because I am kind of worried about when school kicks in that we're going to get another wave, and I don't want to make anybody sick.
Yeah, we're seeing that on my end of the publishing business also, that there was a slew of suggestions for live events in August, September, October that are now pulling back a little bit. But so how has the launch of 25 to Life felt? With a little bit of virtual and a little bit of in person. Yeah,
it's been cool. I mean, it came out yesterday. I had to go up to Maine to work at my mom's house for a little bit, so I kind of missed the online part. But my spouse Brenda, she has a smartphone. I don't have a smartphone, so she's keeping me abreast of the Twitter happenings and the Instagram happenings, and it looks pretty cool. And it's always cool when people start sending you pictures of the thing. When the light years. Yeah, when the light years came out in February 2020, a friend of mine was in Hawaii for a vacation, and they sent me a picture of the book that they bought in Honolulu. Wow. And at the same day, somebody sent me a picture that they bought in the UK. So, it's kind of like mind-boggling that the same, thing that I labored over can be purchased on those two disparate places. Yep. So that's pretty cool. It's really nice. It's really nice that people are reading it. It takes events like these where I kind of figure out how I really want to talk about it. You know what I mean? I have my idea of what the book is, and other people have their idea of what the book is. But now I can read reviews and think, oh yeah, I missed that because I didn't really intend that. But they're right. So that's kind of a cool experience. And I just, I hope it does well. I hope people read it. Hope they like it. Hope they think about it. Maybe it'll do something cool.
Well, so the way you said that makes me wonder, how do you talk about 25 to Life? I guess maybe I could have led with that half an hour ago, but how do you talk about it?
Well, because the interesting thing to me about the book, because I've been living with it for a long time. I've been living with it since 2010. And in 2010, I was in the MFA program. Actually, even before that, I was writing a short story because it started as a short story. And what I used to do with my students is I'd be writing with my students and I'd look around the classroom and I'd say, all right, I'm going to steal your name. I'm going to steal your name. So I picked these two kids, and one was Haley O'Brien and one was Julie Riley, and I wrote this story with those two names in it. The kids, nothing about the kids were the same, but the names were the same. So, over the course of the last, 10 years, that story has been changed, been ripped apart, turned into a book, turned into a YA, turned to a middle grade, turned into this. And, finally, I just kind of paired off two of the storylines, and Julie was the sole survivor. So for me, it's talking about it could be a long experience. For other people, they sum it up with like cli-fi, or they sum it up with like climate fiction, or they sum it up with, dystopia or something like that. But for me, that, thinking about it, there are like elements of Western in there. There are elements of like, non-theistic rapture kind of situation in there. There's all kinds of things that I kind of see in there. And I'm sure I'm missing a lot of stuff because, once you let a book out, it's not really yours anymore. It's however the community is going to respond to it. And odds are they're going to see things that I missed. And that's kind of cool too.
Yeah.
Well, I love that it falls under the umbrella of speculative fiction, because I think 25 to Life has so many elements of what a speculative fiction novel can be, because it's thoughtful. And, so here we have Julie, our main protagonist, whose best friend, Anjali, has just gone off on the colony ship, never to be seen or heard from again. I think you did say 10 billion people were left behind essentially to die.
Yeah.
And one of the fundamental rules in the world that you've built is that the law has been changed so that everybody under the age of 25 years old is a dependent. And as you explain in the book, that's to try to protect the job market a little bit, to try to protect the natural resources a little bit. And as a 23-year-old probably would, Julie rebels against this. And her rebellion takes the form of, again, speaking to speculative fiction, searching out opportunities and hope. And so I don't like the word dystopian for this book, whereas, it is a post-apocalyptic feel in terms of climate change. Julie searches for hope and for independence and for autonomy, and those are some. I just answered my own question, I guess. That's how
you did a fantastic job. That was really good.
But okay, so here's a question for you, and I see that we have some audience questions coming in, so we'll get to those in a second. But Rob, I'm going to ask both of you. Sorry, that's my mother-in-law texting me about an event on Sunday.
Tell her we said hello.
Yeah, we'll do that. So I'm going to ask both of you this. Rob, what is the nicest thing someone has said so far about 25 to Life?
Nicest thing. I think one of the nicest things people have said is that it's actually a hopeful book, which is kind of what I intended, even though it's a situation where there's not a lot of hope. So I think that may be the nicest thing that anybody said about it, that it, gives them some hope that, despite the stuff we've done to the planet, that there might be, a reason to kind of keep going.
Yep. Okay. And Mike, Graveyard Shift, it's been on the shelf for 4 years. What percolates to the top in terms of compliments?
The absolute best compliment I've ever gotten happened about 2 months ago for this IP that I'm working with. And they have a stable of authors that they work with. And we're talking very capable, like another 100 people. And they were like, yeah, we read Graveyard Shift and thought, this is the guy.
Oh.
And when I almost cried. I was like, oh my God. So yeah, that was pretty incredible. So
yeah.
That's really nice.
My big compliment is, where's the next one?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
where's the next book in that universe? So you don't have to answer that, but
well, there is a short story that is coming out probably next year. I don't have. I just turned it in, so it's still going through editing and everything. But it's called Storm Surge, and it is about Alex, who is my protagonist. It takes place like in the same area. Marcus doesn't make an appearance in that, unfortunately, but it's another fun story. This one, it was more fun, I think, than Graveyard Shift. Like Graveyard Shift is very serious, like and this one was not as serious. It's a little bit lighter touch.
So keep an eye out.
That is always a nice thing when fans say, when's the next one?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to pop over just for a minute and answer some of, oh, wow, I need glasses. Okay, sorry. Here's a question for Rob. Your book is about what happens when all the wealthy elites have fled the earth for space and left the rest of us behind. Given the recent events with Branson, Bezos, etc., I've got two questions. Firstly, are you a wizard? And secondly, do you think it would have changed the way you conceived and wrote the book if you'd been writing it now in the midst of this billionaire space race?
I wrote a piece for Mary Robinette Cowell's blog. She has a little thing called My Favorite Bit about, like, what do writers like about their favorite bits about the book. And my favorite bit about writing this book was how hard it was to kind of keep up with the present without falling behind. When I wrote the short story it was called It Pays to Read the Safety Cards, and that was published in 2012. And I named this colony ships, one after Sam Walton from Walmart, one after Richard Branson, one after, like the billionaire from South America. So I named it all after the billionaires, thinking that, this was what they were going to do. They were going to like get their families out, and as a little noblesse oblige kind of thing, they were going to get enough people out to, like, clean their dishes and that kind of stuff. And that's what the future was going to look like. And I think that's always the way it's going to be. The people who win are the people who have the resources to take advantage of a situation. And people like Elon Musk and, Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos, they've got the resources they need to take advantage of the situation. Right now they're buying out New Zealand. That's their climate change refuge. That's where they're going to go next. And, 50, 70 years down the road, when New Zealand's not looking so good, maybe they'll take it up to the space station. But, I don't think it would have changed all that much. Except that maybe I would have like, aha, instead of like, oh yeah, okay. So,
well, there are quite a few shout outs, right, during 25 to Life. But ultimately, I think even if you were writing the book now, the story about Julie, the hashtag van life used in social media is accurate. She's on, a journey toward hope and autonomy, and that story is, what's the word for evergreen is the word I'm looking for. So okay, there's another question that just came in. Mike, you mentioned that Storm Surge is a short story using Alex from Graveyard Shift.
Yes.
The question is, Rob, have you done that also? And I personally know you've done short stories, but can you talk a little bit about short stories or scenes specifically involving characters, either from the Light Years or from 25 to Life, or talk about those short stories briefly in some other?
Yeah, I think a lot of my longer work start out as shorter work. Like if you look at the Light Years, which is a book that came out last year, and you look at a story that's called Love in the Time of Lightspeed, which was published, like in 2017. That story is basically the first chapter of the Light Years, because I like to try out a lot of my kind of like my bigger ideas as short stories first. And sometimes I think, well, hey, this could be a longer thing. And sometimes I think, no, that's enough. So the Julie story, Julie actually didn't make it into the final edition of It Pays to Read the Safety Cards. Ben did, but Julie didn't make it. She was kind of left on the cutting room floor. But I also wrote a story about that same time that came out, I guess, about that same time about another character named Ranger. So her kind of like origin story was published in 2012, I think. So I like, short stories are a good place to kind of like work out character and work out situation, and to think about like, you can do a lot in just like a short span of time in a short story. You can create an entire world, and then you can decide within that world, do you want to stay in there? Do you want to keep playing? Do you want to keep working on it? Yep. So I think a lot of my stuff starts at that short story level. And then it either expands or it doesn't. I hope that answers the question.
That's a good one. I like that. And for those of you who haven't read 25 to Life yet, Ranger is a character that interacts with Julie, Julie adopts a road name, which I won't give it away, but Ranger is the road name for somebody who Julie interacts with extensively. And it's a very, very interesting, complicated, very nuanced relationship that brings a lot to the book. So that's cool. It's good to know that they exist in the short form. I have a question specifically for Mike from the audience. Does being a Warhammer player help with your writing? Does it make it easy to think of action scenes, for example? Have you ever created any characters in the guise of figurines? So that's a 3-part question.
Yeah. So the answer to the last part is yes, because that's some of this IP work I've been doing. And then does it help to write action scenes? Not so much. Well, the figurines, yes and no, because I use RPGs a lot. I use GURPS and Fate a lot to just kind of do some quick character creation and just, is this plausible? Mm-hmm. So a lot of times if things happen too easily in the book, I will roll it out. I actually have Fate dice right here, right on my desk, because I will. Metal Fate dice, and they just have a plus and a minus and a blank. Mm-hmm. And so you just roll these, and you're just like, oh, that was 3 plus signs, so it went off really well, or oh, that was 4 minus signs. That's going to be really unhappy event, and then I write that,
that's cool.
That's cool.
And try to figure out how my character is going to get out from a critical fumble. That kind of thing.
That's cool.
Or not.
Or not.
Yeah. That's cool.
Excellent. Okay, so I have another one for Rob. It sounds like van life is a big part of your new book. How much experience have you had or research have you done on life on the road?
I like road trips. My wife and I are good road trippers. And when we vacation, we take road trips. I kind of came up with the idea of the Volksgeist, which is the community of kind of van lifers in the book, back in like 2010, before van life was a hashtag. I'm sure there was a van life back then, but they just weren't putting it on Instagram. So I've probably done more research since. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a hodgepodge of things. Like the idea of the road name is something I took from Appalachian Trail hikers, because a lot of those Appalachian Trail hikers, they adopt a road name, mm-hmm. usually given to them for something they've done, or done something funny. But if you're going to a situation where you're trying to escape what's behind, of course you're going to want to like give it up and be someone different, right? And since then, my wife and I have this kind of dream of getting a minivan and putting not a bunk bed, but a bed in the back, and just kind of like doing road trips that way. So I do find myself watching a lot of van life videos, van life conversion videos now, but not a lot of that actually made it into the book, because most of that part of the book was written long before I got into the checking out solar panels and all that kind of stuff.
Well, but I think it influences the book. I mean, I think one of the things that's so interesting about how Julie's life changes when she is hooked up with Ranger is the dichotomy of we need a large group of people in order to be safe, but at mm-hmm. the same time, a large group of people is a larger target for gangs and mm-hmm. for police. And and I think that could be the speculative fiction element of it, but I do think that probably maybe was influenced if you're watching YouTube videos of van life and thinking about what is it actually like to caravan. Yeah. And in this post-apocalyptic world, the idea that many people is safety and many people is danger.
Well, one of the things that the van lifers on like Instagram and YouTube talk about a lot is the community they find. Yeah. They all park in 6 of them park in the same place, and they share their food and they fix each other's vans and that kind of stuff. And some of that came from when I was a kid. My Uncle Ruth or Aunt Ruth and Uncle Jerry used to rent at a campground. They had a travel trailer. They'd rent this campground, and that always seemed very dystopian to me in a lot of ways, because it's all this these kind of people parked everywhere, and kids running around, and you're not at home, and you're not taking showers, and you're eating. It always seemed like very much on the run to me. So I think that's where a lot of that came from. It's just going to those campgrounds and just here's this these people with their little camper, and here's these other people with this little camper, and they're calling this for the moment a found community. And in a month, the community will break up and go somewhere else, maybe. So I was really kind of intrigued by that idea as a kid, and I think that carried through into the book.
Well, I think that answers that person's question very well. So in addition to looking at YouTube, your experience as a child with that auntie and uncle influenced the book considerably.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I have two more here. More have come in. So how about let's aim for a lightning round. Here's one for Rob, and then I have one for both of you, and then I have one for Mike, and then I have one for Rob. So those will be our last 4 questions probably. Okay, for Rob. I read The Light Years and was really struck by how human it felt, that there was as much focus on relationships and character as there was on tech and action. And it sounds like 25 to Life is very much in the same vein. Have you always gravitated toward sci-fi fantasy fiction which focuses on these aspects, or was that something you came to read after reading Golden Age techie sci-fi?
I think...
What are some of your favorite science fiction fantasy books by other authors that tell those kinds of stories? That was wrong. Okay, so talk about the focus on relationships and character as opposed to tech and action, and what other authors write like that you like.
Right. Well, I think where I kind of came from that really was journalism. I did 11 years of journalism and kind of came to the conclusion that stories are not about events, they're about people. So it's not about, the new law. It's about how people are affected by the new law, or, it's not about the place in the road that's not paved. It's about all the pains in the ass and the breaking axles and all that kind of stuff that people are not. So I think, as a journalist, trying to write stories from that perspective influenced a lot of my fiction writing. And as far as who's writing like that now, I love Becky Chambers. The last book I read by her was basically kind of a stuck in the elevator idea. Is all these disparate people were basically at a rest stop and they couldn't leave. And that was the plot of the thing. They couldn't leave because of some kind of technological problem up in the atmosphere. So it was really all about these people who had their own agendas and their own places to go. And they were just stuck there for a couple of weeks, and about well, what are we going to do now? Let's talk to each other. Let's learn about each other. Let's have a dinner party. Let's have a relationship. Let's do this, and I just really like that idea. I mean, it's not super exciting, but
I think it is super exciting, but to this person's point, I don't think that it is, how did they put it? Tech and action.
Tech and action, right. It's not very plot driven. It's just about it's very people driven. And I like that kind of thing.
I think that's a good answer. And that shows up in your books for sure.
Yeah, because
go ahead, please, Mike.
The Light Years. When I first talked to Rob, I mentioned that. I said when I was reading The Light Years, I would have written the more obvious story. Given the same prompt. If we were given the same prompt, I would have written the more sci-fi actiony story. But he wrote the more interesting story. So I thought that was actually. It was a really cool surprise when I was reading that book.
It depends on your taste. Some people might really want to read that more action-y story, and that's cool too. Dan Morin, who's a writer in Somerville, he writes the Galactic Cold War series for Angry Robot, and they're, it's about this these special forces people who are always doing the thing and doing the heist, and so they're always got action and that kind of stuff. But there's always these moments where they're kind of in the kitchen and the boss guy is making everybody breakfast, and they have this kind of found family kind of thing. So you've got one or the other, but you've also got people that'll kind of hit to find the middle way, the middle ground, which is really cool too. So.
Well, and Mike, this is what I mentioned right at the beginning, that you two both write speculative fiction, but from wildly different timbres.
Mhm.
And Mike, yours is the tech and the action kind of book, but think about the relationship between our two protagonists. That is a very relationship
It's a
driven.
long relationship too.
Yeah.
Yeah, years and years of history there, which makes
In
it really
Hollywood,
cool.
we call that the buddy cop story, right? And to Rob's point, that the two of them have been together for generations.
Yeah.
And
And they may
that's
be
the
way
way-
too old for this shit, but they can still handle it, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where it comes out. So cool. That's a good answer. Thank you both. This is the question for both of you, and this is just meant to be sort of a bullet point answer. How has the past 18 months been for you creatively? Talk about new hobbies or going back to old hobbies, and how you've been writing.
Well, I can say, and this is going to sound really bad, but it's been outstanding for my writing. I went for a long period of time getting nothing but rejections and not getting any traction on anything. And then all of a sudden, I think it started about this time last year. I started getting a lot of sales, just a lot of sales, a lot of commission work, a lot of stuff. And I've been busier than I've ever been as far as writing goes. So.
And what about hobbies? Have you been writing in the same way? I know that you get up very, very early.
I get up at 4:34 in the morning because of Jocko Willink. If anybody wants to find out why, just go look at his thing. And yeah, as far as hobbies go, it was kind of when they announced the whole lockdowns and everything. I was very lucky in that the job that I do, I can do from home. I write proposals for a defense contractor. So I can do it from home. It didn't really affect me. My local game store was hurt badly, So I went in there and dropped easily, a lot of money on tons of games, thinking I'm going to have all kinds of time. And then we didn't have any time at all. So things did not slow down one bit. And I have a lot of unopened boxes downstairs, but I did, I did my part, and I was trying to just help out. And these were products I was going to buy anyway, and I had an excuse to pick them up. So,
if I remember correctly, you did a podcast about this time last year, listing off a whole bunch of tabletop games that would be great for the pandemic, and that resulted in just me also dropping way too much money at the game store, picking up your recommendations.
Yeah,
cool. Rob, how about you?
I had a really hard time getting anything going during the early days. I mean, the election was going on, and Trump was going on, and the pandemic was going on, and I spent so much time, I think, with all that in my head that writing became real hard. I managed to pull it out, and I managed to write some stuff, but it felt like years, but it was probably only months that I was like, I was looking at the page and thinking, no, I got to find out what Trump is doing and complain about him instead.
Yeah.
But I managed to kind of find the balance after a while. My wife Brenda, not only was she telling me that I needed to turn off the internet before I went to bed, but she was saying, hey, no one cares about your 15th tweet about Donald Trump. So she was very smart. And I learned from her, and I was able to kind of start writing again. So it's been, and then kind of like Mike, I was in a situation where I didn't have to, it didn't change my life much. I could keep working from home. I'm a hermit anyway, so it wasn't like I was like, begging to go out. I missed the library, but. And there's a little survivor's guilt involved in that because, people, are like losing money and losing jobs and losing homes and that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, well, I'll just make some popcorn. So, I'm glad it's over. I'm glad for all the extroverts who have not been able to talk to anybody in a long, long time. Actually, let me rephrase that. I wish it was over.
Actually, get vaccinated point from earlier.
Yeah. But it was, I got a lot of work done. I didn't catch COVID. I got vaccinated. It was not so bad for me.
Okay. So when was 25 to Life put to bed? Because I don't remember.
I don't either. I want to say because I gave it to you to try to sell, not too long after we met, which was Dublin Con.
September 2019.
So like 2 years ago. So I think I gave it
Wow.
to you by the end of October, end of November to sell. And then we kind of waited for a while. So I think that was when it was written.
Okay. So you did do some significant editing during the pandemic then.
Yeah. And I also wrote, the next book that's coming out in 2022. And I've written most of the book after that. But a lot of that's been, and I feel like, it's crazy to think that 2021 only has like 4 months left in it. So a lot of that stuff was probably in 2021, late 2020.
And remind me to have you talk about Mercury rising before we wrap up.
Sure.
I want to say, the what's coming next conversation. That's important too. But okay. All right. Well, here's to authors being able to stay home safely during the pandemic. I think that's two really good examples.
Yeah.
So 2 more quick questions, one for Mike and one for Rob. Mike, did your time in the military inspire any of your ideas in your writing and your approach to it? Would you say you're a more disciplined writer than you would have been if you hadn't had that experience?
I don't know about disciplined. I think I'm finding discipline now. I'm forcing myself to be more disciplined and put out a lot of stuff. And I have to confess, I was very discouraged because I've been trying to do this thing for a long, long time. In fact, I found the first story I sent out to Asimov from like 1996 the other day. And my book came out in 2017. So that's the journey I've been on. And a lot of times it just felt like, why am I doing this? Because I could be playing Xbox or whatever. It doesn't matter. But I think where my experience in the military, I have a very kind of cynical outlook on things. So I try to make things as realistic as possible. And I have a very, I have faith in Murphy's Law. Like it will absolutely bite you at the worst possible time. So a lot of my writing reflects that, where the heroes are going to go do something and they've got it all planned out and everything. And one of my favorite axioms is no plan survives contact with the enemy. Yeah. So it's just like as soon as they run into something, everything goes south, and now you've got to react.
Incidentally, that will be the tagline of your next book, because I'm going to see that happens. Okay. You're right, though. I think somewhere in January 2021, I sent you an email saying everything is coming up Haspel.
Yeah.
We've inked a lot of work this year. Good, hard work that a lot of it can't be talked about yet. But it's been a journey. If that means discipline, or if that just means you've got great stories that just keep coming out and they're finding their market, that's
Well, you need the discipline now, because now you're so busy, you've got to regiment your time. Yes. I think it's easier to be more disciplined the more you have to do. If I have oceans and oceans of time, I will get nothing done. Yes. But if I have to fit my writing in between this, I used to, when I was a high school teacher, I used to get up at 4:30 in the morning and write till it was time to go, and that was the only time I had to write. So I wrote a lot, but it's all about, if you have oceans of time, I think you get less done.
Yeah. My marching band director in college used to say that you get the amount of work done and the amount of time that is given to do it. Yeah. And I remember we, in 1996, you were talking about your first story pitch being 96. In 96, I was marching in the Rose Bowl parade with Northwestern University as a senior in college. And I remember we had to learn an entire drill. And the way that the Rose Bowl week turned out, we had something like 25 minutes at 11 p.m. one night to learn the drill.
Oh my gosh.
And the entire band was exhausted, and we got onto the field, and the director looked green, and he said, we get the work done in the amount of time that we have to do it, and we got it done in 24 minutes.
Yeah, at the academy we had a somewhat similar phrase, but it was way more, I don't know, doomsday-ish. It was, if you wait until the last minute, it only takes a minute to do.
Oh, I like that, actually. Oh, so that's my kid's plan for homework. Oh, okay. See, there's another T-shirt I need to have made. He's not listening because, thank God he's at school because, again, vaccine. Anyway. Well, thank you. That's a good answer, Mike. Last question for Rob. Was there ever a version of 25 to Life where you delved into the lives of the people on board the generation ships, or were you always more interested in the people left behind?
The first version of the book had three protagonists. It had had Julie, it had Angie, who went into space, and it had Ben, who stayed behind and became a home spelunker. So out there in my files is still Angie's story, which is all the life on board the ship that she sailed away on.
Proxima Centauri. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And then there's another book that I haven't written, but I've sketched it out for what happens when they arrive. Because
that's cool.
One of the interesting things I think about that whole pioneer thing is, like, in Rebecca Chambers explores this a little bit in one of her books, that, once you've been on a ship for 80 years and you've gotten comfortable with that life, how comfortable are you going to be getting off and starting to farm and build roads? So what's to keep you from just like staying on board, not staying on board the ship? So that kind of that unwritten book that I've kind of sketched out and actually I wrote a short story that came out kind of on that ship. But that's about that experience of, like, some people want to get off the ship and some people don't, so it's all about.
Well, and your earlier point about Bezos and Branson hiring people to clean their dishes, how does that influence who is chosen to go onto the ship? I mean, somebody who is 50 like me, who knows how to, clean dishes. Well, when I'm 120, that's not a good example, but if I'm 50 and I'm a really good farmer, how does that affect me at 120 when we land on Proxima Centauri?
Right.
So would I be chosen? If I'm a great farmer, but I'm going to be way too old to farm by the time we land, maybe I'm not chosen. Maybe the 8-year-old is chosen regardless of talent. That's interesting. Cool. So now I must ask you what's next. So Mike, we've heard a little bit about the IP work that's coming next, and thumbs up to that. So Rob, I know that we have another book coming out next year in 2022. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've got a trilogy I'm working on. It's an alternate history trilogy. Starts in the 70s and kind of looks at the idea of, like, what if the Cold War in the 70s was not against the Soviets, but was instead against an unknown alien power? And kind of goes into the 80s and goes to the 90s in the ensuing books. And the first book is called Mercury Rising, and it should be out in spring 2022. And then the next book is called Earth Retrograde. It should be out in spring 2023. And then we'll see about book 3.
That's excellent, which means that, let's see, I'll have my eyeball on World Fantasy in Glasgow in 2024.
Yeah, I would love to go to Glasgow. Yeah, know, right? That's cool. Yeah.
So I'm saving up for that now. So we will have definitely some good things to celebrate by then.
That would be awesome.
That would be awesome. And I forgot to ask you about the typewriters. And as our time is ticking out, both of you have really cool typewriter stories. So tell us the typewriter stories really quickly.
Mike, you want to go? I don't know yours.
Yeah. So I recently splurged and bought this device that is entirely too expensive called a FreeWrite, which is an electronic typewriter that uses an e-ink screen. The keyboard is amazing. And the coolest thing about it, and a lot of people will not agree, but Rob will, is that you absolutely cannot edit on the thing. You can't go, they have a backspace function. So if you actively, created a typo, you can backspace, but that's it. You have to just keep going forward no matter what. And so if you have an idea of, oh man, I need to go back up to this paragraph and add this, you can't do that. So you have to just make a note to yourself in line. And I've added almost 500 words to my writing sessions because of that. And I find I just get into that zone like way easier. It's easier to just turn off the inner editor, because you're just like, I just came up. Well, you know what? I can't do it. So just keep going. Just make a note and I'll come back to it afterwards.
And what's
That's cool.
A FreeWrite.
FreeWrite.
And it's probably a little too expensive, but it already has paid for itself. So
yeah, and they have Wi-Fi, and you can back it up to the cloud, so you don't have to
Yes.
worry about losing it. Yeah, they're pretty cool. And they have the click keyboard, so they've got a decent
Yes.
keyboard on them. Yeah,
it's an amazing keyboard. It's mechanical keyboard with the cherry brown keys or whatever, and it's amazing.
Yep. And my story is that I collect typewriters, manual typewriters. I've got about 40 of them. I started collecting them because my students needed more things to type on, so I kept picking up typewriters at lawn sales for like $5 and $6 and $15 and fixing them up. And I do a fair amount of my first draft work on a typewriter for the same reason, that you can't go back and delete. You can't get Twitter on it. You can't get Facebook on it. It's very kind of tactile. It makes cool noises. It smells cool. And I can just, and when I go up to say I'm writing, I tell Brenda I'm going to go up to write. She can tell I'm actually writing because she can hear it. So I can't get away with not writing. And I think if you don't have a free write, then you probably ought to get a typewriter and try it out.
And I'll throw in a plug for a cheaper, like distraction-free thing called an Alpha Smart Neo.
Those are cool too. Yeah.
Yeah. You can pick them up for about $40 on eBay, and they were made for like middle schoolers.
Yeah.
But it's a word processor.
Tiny little digital screen. Yeah.
Yeah. 2 or 3 sentences at a time. And all you can do is type on the thing. So
That's well, I love that. I love that. I remember you two talking about typewriters and being very interested in what you were talking about. So thank you for sharing. That's wonderful. Can you please both tell us where we can find you on the internets?
I'm at RWW Greene, Greene, at both Twitter and Instagram. And I have a website at rwwgreene.com.
Yeah. And I'm at michaelhaspil.com. And at Michael Haspil on Twitter. I spend most of my time though on the Facebooks, but if you go there, you're just gonna see Warhammer memes and dad jokes. That's really all I do on there.
Which is, frankly, at this point, Warhammer is way more interesting than most of the stuff on Twitter anyway. So that's a win. And again, for people, Mike, remind us the title of your book.
Oh, it's a Graveyard Shift.
Okay, and it can be found in print, ebook, and audio at all good places.
Mm-hmm.
And Rob, the 2 books that you have out?
The Light Years and 25 to Life.
Also both available in print, ebook, and audio. And I'm currently listening to the audiobook of 25 to Life and enjoying it very much.
Cool beans.
So excellent. I do believe that I'm getting the signal that we are almost done, if not already done. So thank you all for joining us today. I've been looking forward to this all week because these are 2 of my absolute favorite humans and they represent some of my absolute favorite books. And it was a real pleasure. So
yeah, thank you for doing the emceeing, Sarah.
Of course.
And Mike, I've enjoyed getting to know you.
Thank you. Yeah, nice meeting you as well.
I hope we all get to be in human form someplace together. Maybe it's Glasgow, maybe it's Boscone. I mean, you've totally got me re-excited about Boscone next year or the following year. So we'll make that happen.
Yeah. It's a cool con.
It is. And you're good people. So
yep.
Good people and good cons is a good future. So
yep.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much.
Of course. Be well and have a good afternoon.
You as well. Okay. And thank you, Sam, wherever you are.